Today is a Quinquagesima Sunday. As Latin, Quinquagesima is 50, and of course 50 is approximately 50 days until Easter. Just briefly, Lent, 40 days of Lent are the 40 days minus the Sundays. So on Sundays throughout Lent, we don't fast on Sundays, and it's not considered part of the 40 days. So as Lent comes on, we take on various practices, and maybe I'll talk about that next Sunday or so. But in general, we take on a number of practices. In general, children will give up candy or sweets, desserts maybe, even adults too for that matter. Adults give up something else, and let's say someone might only have a drink once a year. To give up alcohol probably is not really a penance of any sort whatsoever. In general, one should give up something, give up whatever it might be, as a means of mortification. It could be used as a source of penance to make reparation for past sins. It could be used to correct some fault. It could be used purely to make reparation for sins of even others. But in all of this, one should use the various penances that we take on as a means of sanctifying ourselves during this season, such that when Lent is over, we can carry on in the practice of some virtue, of which we took this practice of giving something up, that we might be able to practice some virtue more perfectly. And it's not just Lent, it's not just giving something up, it's also taking on, one could take on some practice. Maybe doing some good work, some charitable work, make a point of particularly practicing charity or whatever it might be. Maybe some virtue, or maybe doing some corporal work of mercy, or even a spiritual work of mercy. There's a number of things. We just don't have to give up things during Lent, but one could certainly give things up, but also take on practices. The epistle appointed for today's Mass is taken the first epistle of St. Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 13, verses 1 through 13. Brethren, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And if I should have prophecy and know all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I should have all faith so that I could remove mountains, and have not charity, I am nothing. And if I should distribute all my goods to feed the poor, and if I should deliver my body to be burned and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. Charity is patient, is kind. Charity envieth not, it dealeth not perversely, is not puffed up, is not ambitious, seeketh not her own, is not provoked to anger, thinketh no evil, rejoices not in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Charity never falleth away, whether prophecies shall be made void, or tongues shall cease, or knowledge shall be destroyed. For we know now in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, that which is in part is done away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away the things of a child. I see now through a glass in a dark manner, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know even as I am known. And now there remain faith, hope, and charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity. The Gospel appointed for today's Mass, taken the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 18, verses 31 through 43. At that time Jesus took unto him the 12 and said to them, Behold, we go to Jerusalem, and all things shall be accomplished, which were written by the prophets concerning the Son of Man. For he shall be delivered to the Gentiles, and shall be mocked and scourged and spit upon. And after they have scourged him, they will put him to death, and the third day he shall rise again. And they understood none of these things, and this word was hid from them, and they understood not the things that were said. Now it came to pass, when he drew nigh to Jericho, that a certain blind man sat by the wayside begging. When he had heard the multitude passing by, he asked what this meant, and they told him that Jesus of Nazareth was passing by. And he cried out, saying, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And they that went before rebuked him, that he should hold his peace. But he cried out much more, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus, standing, commanded him to be brought unto him. And when he is come near, he asked him, saying, What wilt thou that I do to thee? But he said, Lord, that I may see. And Jesus said to him, Receive thy sight, thy faith hath made thee whole. And immediately he saw and followed him, glorifying God. And all the people, when they saw it, gave praise to God. Thus far, the words of today's Holy Gospel. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. When I become a man, I put away the things of a child. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Just as one more note, today we commemorate the apparition of Our Lady of Lourdes. and there will be a proper last gospel. When I say we commemorate commemorate the feast day, this be any feast day. We take the collect or the prayer, the secret, the post communion. We add it to the prayer of today's mass. So we have the mass of Quinquagesima. So after I pray the oration, the first oration, then I add the prayer from the apparition of Our Lady of Lourdes, and then same thing, the secret. I say the secret of the Mass, and after that, then I'll go to the feast day of Our Lady of Lourdes, take that secret, and then same thing, the post communion. Then in place of the Gospel of St. John, the end of Mass, I'll read the Gospel taken from the apparition of Our Lady. But as I mentioned, I was sort of giving us quasi-sermons, sort of sermons more or less on marriage, one aspect of it or another. And I'd like to just do another one on the same thing. And the point being is that what I want to cover now is a preparation for marriage, sort of a quasi-remote preparation for marriage in parenthood. It includes a study. Can you imagine going to any other profession without some study, some preparation? It requires that one has a real understanding of human relations, and that one can get into relationship with someone else with dignity and respect, and inside the marriage have self-discipline and act prudently in this matter. As with all things, we just don't wake up, like St. Paul says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child, I thought as a child, I acted as a child. He's right command to put these things away. Well, St. Paul, or none of us for that matter, all of a sudden we turn 21, we look at the clock, it's midnight, say, well, I'm a man now, or I'm a woman. Now I don't act like a child. I don't whine, I don't cry, I don't, all the things we do as a child, a little child. He says, well, I'm 21 now, I don't do these things. No, one starts putting aside the things of a child as one grows older. And the same thing with acquiring this self-discipline or prudence. One does not wait, one better not wait until one says, well, I guess I'm going to get married, I see someone I want to marry, I better start acting prudent, I better start saving my money, or I better start disciplining myself and just running around dissipated, being an alcoholic or whatever it might be. I better acquire some dignity if I'm going to get into a marriage. Now, that should be something that should be acquired and put into practice long before the question is popped that would you want to marry me type thing. And so what one has to do, and this is incumbent upon the parents, that they would use the opportunities that present themselves, that they can teach their children to be virtuous, to have that self-discipline, to acquire that prudence, to have that dignity about them, to have that aura about them that they not only respect others, but others can respect them for what they do. And it comes down to it, it makes no difference, even, for example, what religion we belong to. There is a standard, a moral standard, that's actually found in nature that we can abide by, that we must abide by, that we can't just arbitrarily disregard that. The criteria that have been used for centuries, and I want to say frequently nowadays neglected, is the Ten Commandments that God revealed to us. It must be a personal guide for each and every one of us. It isn't some vague general thing. It applies. All the Ten Commandments apply to all of us. Maybe for most of them we don't have to worry about them, but on the other hand, they're there for good reason, and we must know those Ten Commandments. How many times is it that I've come across over the years of being a priest that someone says, well, my mother told me that this commandment here didn't apply to me. Well, it does. Maybe it isn't right here and now, but it does. Every one of the commandments apply to us. We mustn't work on Sunday. The Sixth Commandment applies all the time. Maybe for a 6-year-old different than a 16-year-old, but it's still there. It still has to be there. We have to practice it. And we practice virtue in regards to, let's say, the Sixth Commandment or the Fifth Commandment in little things, such that in the big things we don't go do the big thing either, whatever it might be. So that is sort of the remote preparation for marriage. And ultimately, their preparation is for this calling of marriage and of parenthood. It's essential that people understand the Ten Commandments, how they apply, not just in the open. I mean, just every commandment is just it says, "Thou shalt not kill." Under that commandment, it blossoms out into getting angry, for example, or "Thou shalt not steal." It even comes under that would come borrowing and not returning, or damaging other people's goods through negligence or carelessness or whatever it might be. It's not just the Ten Commandments, but the whole facet that it goes with each commandment, how we look at each and every one. And we have to acquire this delicacy of conscience when it comes to commandments, that we just don't arbitrarily put them aside as if it means nothing. But aside from the Ten Commandments, there's a number of other things that one should do as well. And this partially is a responsibility, I think, of the parents. Likewise, and of course, I guess it goes back to the parents that they should be teaching their children in this matter. So one of the first things that couples do, a young man or young woman wants to do, and they want to get married, they want to start dating. They start looking to others, and with good purpose, because dating, the purpose is actually, I suppose, manifold. There are a number of reasons why we do so. First off, we get acquainted and get to know someone of the opposite sex. And likewise, and it's really important to learn what men and learn what women are like that are not in your family. Because we grow up in a family. If you have 6, 8, 2, 3, 4, every children are in a family. We grew up and my brother acts this way, my sister acts this way. And we get this here tunnel vision of how girls are supposed to act or how boys are supposed to act. Just like if you don't get out any, the way your mother makes the meals, this is what food is like. We don't know anything different. We think that Chinese might think all there is Chinese food, and German thinks all there is sauerkraut and blutwurst, or whatever it might be, and we think this is all there is. We move away from home, and all of a sudden we find out there's Italian food or any other kind of food. And the same thing with people. We grow up, we know what our father's like, we know what our mother's like, and we know the quirks of our sister, and or our brother, and innately we sort of think that this must be the way they all are. And yet, this is not the case. So we have to get to know others to find out what other people are like, that we find out what their personalities are like, what their traits are like, what someone who's not just necessarily our family. And in so doing, we develop skills in getting along with other people from different families and different environments, different backgrounds. In general, you can probably heard me quote me saying that in general, if you want to marry your own kind. Not just nationality, I suppose I'd even apply it there too as a general rule, but farmers marry farmer's daughter, a farmer's son marries a farmer's daughter, a banker's son marries a banker's daughter. And the reason is just that they understand the more or less how bankers work. When they're married to a banker, you understand that he has specific hours, he does this, whatever, or farmers, whatever it might be. But also by getting out and meeting others, one develops a certain poise, one becomes more articulate in one's conversation, and you learn that what the rest of the world is like, so to speak. To learn of other interests and other hobbies, whatever it might be, such that you find out that once again we're not all like our brother or our sister or our mother or our father. So during this time, it just isn't necessary for dating as such that just this boy goes with this girl. It doesn't hurt, and this is for parents. It doesn't hurt that the adolescents get together in a group, if you will, go to a skating party. In one sense, this is where the summer school catechism actually pays off in that sense, because they can actually meet other children. And two things: one is they realize that they're not the only ones in the whole world that are traditional. And also the fact that they learn to interact with other people with different backgrounds. They find out that, yes, our family doesn't do this, but others do that. And we get to realize that we're not all the same. We're not all clones of the same family. But it enables them, when young men and young women can get together in a group, it has the added benefit that then if there's half a dozen young adults going out doing some hiking or whatever it might be. Doesn't have to be anything expensive, doesn't have to be anything exotic or anything. but just that they can see how others react with one another, that when they see this boy or this girl acting among the other boys, or the girl with the other girls, we start seeing what she's like, because as always the case is that if a young man and a young girl a young woman go out, young lady goes out on a date, they're putting on their best behavior. But if they're in a group, they'll put their cautions down and they'll act more natural. And you can actually see them in there, if you will, in the environment with others, how they conduct themselves. By themselves, he's very polite. He opens the doors. He does everything else. But when he's with his other buddies, we start hearing him use bad language, let's say, or we start finding out that he really starts drinking a lot, or whatever it might be. All the various things that we start seeing, you would have seen just on a one basis. At a movie where the lights are turned out, we can't see how he's acting or around others. And that so this is one of the first things we do, is this development of friendship that with other persons, so that when they mature enough and are ready for marriage, they'll have some insight in the characters and the characteristics of possible one spouse, and this will contribute to marital success. So as one, and this also simply comes down and gives us, I'll use the word social grace, social skills in meeting others and learning to enjoy friends who do have different tastes, who do have different practices, who do have a different background. And you can find out that you can still have a good time. And you just don't realize, for example, a rancher's daughter says, well, I'm going to marry a rancher's son. Fine, marry your own kind, good. But the chance of a rancher's daughter finding a rancher's son might be pretty slim, especially when most people aren't rancher's daughters or rancher's sons or rancher's families, whatever it might be, or any other line of work, whatever it might be. But in so doing this, it does contribute to get to know a wide, broad group of friends, to get to understand other people and get to enjoy other people. And you find out that there is other food besides, whatever it might be. And also, in this whole matter, too, it enables one to become less selfish, because we have to bow down to others, to their entertainment. Whereas if it's just one-on-one, it's just like, well, we're going to do either what you want to do or what I want to do. Or if one's a little more strong-headed, a little more self-willed, or strong-willed, it says, well, I want to do this. I always want to do this. And if it's just that way, then the lesser of the two will just say, okay, we'll go along. And they don't really learn their social skills in this matter. And they can become very selfish, because they learn, as Father Daniel Lord said in one of his pamphlets, he says there's just two go together all the time, and they learn to dance together, and they know the steps, and if it isn't quite right, you get to accommodate it, and you don't learn to do with others what it can be. So it's something that is good for others to do, and also we find out that there are others who have, and we can foster different interests, different skills. There can be a number of fascinating things we can do that maybe our parents never showed us, or we never did it in our family type thing. Photography, mountain climbing, stamp collecting, playing musical instruments, or whatever it might be, singing, going to plays, putting on plays, all kinds of various hobbies one can do. Getting to know and being around others, finding out what they're like. And it's, I think, a very good thing to do so. So dating offers a young couple experiences that will enable them to be more selective in choosing a partner that will become their spouse for life. So these experiences helps one to formulate an idea of not only what other people can be like, but formulate an idea of the kind of person that you would like to marry, that you'd like to share the rest of your life with. And steady dating, starting too soon before you have date experience with other members of the opposite sex, tends to stifle any opportunity you or maybe this other person has to look around and acquire and gain these invaluable experiences. Invaluable because otherwise we got the blinders on. We don't see all that's out there. We just see what we see, and we think that's just what it's supposed to be, and we could be way off in what the world is like. In this matter, too, those who are contemplating marriage, as a general rule, I say marry your own kind, there should, and that's actually no law at all. It just said, it goes back to the principle that there's a certain need for familiarity, that we be similar in a lot of things. In education, so if one's a college student, one should probably marry someone who's likewise educated. The same age, you wouldn't want to have someone who's 60 years old marrying an 18-year-old. It causes problems. So one should have likewise the same interests. The expression is that opposites attract. Well, maybe magnets do. If you turn them from the North Pole to South Pole type thing, they do attract. But also, if it doesn't quite squared, opposites can repel each other as well, and it becomes repelled just as violently as it can attract. But really, inside of marriage, you want to have someone that's very similar, because these factors, the fact that we have more in common, there's a greater potential for success in marriage. If one likes to go hunting all the time and the other wants to catch butterflies all the time, and so they go their own way, and pretty soon they're drifting. One's drifting out after butterflies across the field, the other's going the field the other way looking for an elk, whatever it might be, and they soon don't have any common interests. So finding someone with common interests gives a greater potential for success inside of marriage. So these are just a few of the things that is necessary, that one should have in preparation for marriage. Each factor in itself is not necessarily going to be a problem if there's just one difference, two difference, but if everything becomes so that they're really opposites in what they want and even what they believe in. So it goes back to even marry your own kind. Catholics marry Catholics. That would be a good rule to follow. And also, too, to start dating singularly one person for a long time, let's say starting in high school, which I think is too young, because once one starts dating, it's for the purpose of getting married. If one's not ready to marry financially or mentally or physically ready to marry, then one should not date. One can go out in a group and get to know others. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But but once they start, then it becomes real serious. But a number of things can cause problems inside of marriage, but two of them are big problems I see. One is, of course, money, or the lack thereof. It can probably causes 50% of problems, if not divorces, inside of marriage. And a good share is the difference of religion. Likewise, even in many ways, a far more serious problem it could be. And the difference would be, let's say, between a Catholic and a Protestant, can be just as serious as, let's say, two Protestants, one who is Episcopalian and one who's a Methodist, or between, let's say, a Jew and a Gentile. When you have different beliefs, certainly it can and certainly will cause a problem in that unity that should be there. The unity, the purpose, the very spirituality of the marriage will be affected one way or another. And certainly, and if it comes to the matter of principle, one has to stand up in principle, and in order to stand in principle, you have to know the principle. Basically, we have to know the Ten Commandments. We have to know what the laws are, what's required of this. Otherwise, we can't stand in principle. But once there's a principle established, one cannot compromise. So how can one compromise, for example, if one marries someone who believes that Jesus Christ is God and the spouse believes that Jesus Christ is not God? There can't be any compromise there. One has to know the faith well enough and understand what our faith is, such that that we realize where it's at. And so you don't want something like that inside of marriage. Then there's always a question of a mixed marriage. One doesn't want a mixed marriage, and so those young people who think, well, they're not really going to marry a non-Catholic, but they're dating a non-Catholic, and it does cause a problem. But they say, well, we're not going to marry; we're just dating. But just remember, dating is finding out who someone is like, and if we're going to start finding out who someone is like, we start finding things nice about them. Aside from religion, there's a lot of like things there. But if religion is going to be a problem, the difference of religion, it becomes a real serious problem. So one has to be so cautious in this matter. Certainly, I think if someone's a little older, if someone's really strong in the faith, finding a Protestants is fine. Finding non-Catholic is fine, but the church does forbid it. But certain conditions have to be met first, and usually is that if someone is strong in faith, they would want to make sure that they marry a Catholic. That's sort of the rules. It is the rule that one marries a Catholic. So all of these things come into play just in preparation, not as 18, 21, 20-year-olds say, well, I'm ready to get married, I want to get married. This is some of the preparation beforehand. That as young children go into adolescence, into young adults, that they learn these skills, that they learn of others, of our faith, of people, just in general, learning of other people, who they are. That is so, when they do get ready to marry, they don't come in with a jaundiced view of what a young lady or a young man is supposed to be like. And, of course, they always have to understand, too, that once they get inside of marriage, they have to be mature. They have to be mature in their actions. And once they're married, it's just that, okay, let's say they're mature, but it doesn't stop. They should mature with age. They should be maturing as they get older, such that when they came into the marriage early in life, they settled down and they worked out a daily routine. They remembered that their career, their routine, of course, doesn't have to be dull, but that it will be the source of them growing in love, growing in the relationship. It should be deepening. That conjugal love that should be replaced by more mature romantic love, if you will. And life then can take on a new meaning, a better meaning, and it can be a very life of not only joy and happiness, but as I like to say, husband and wife, I say as a general rule, will probably go together, heaven or hell. So if one strives to sanctify oneself and keeps an eye, understanding that our end is not here just on this world, but for eternity, and that they're working for that end, they work together, then they can find happiness not only in this life, but certainly in the next. May God bless you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen.